Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Weird World Podcast. I'm Carrie.
I'm Dean.
And you going to refresh our memories?
I am. This is Oak Island Mystery Part 2. Part 1, we chatted about a little bit of history of Oak Island, given kind of the lay of the land, the island off of, as you know, the coast of Nova Scotia, and how the whole initial kind of origin story of Oak Island, how this teenage kid finds this block and tackle over this depression on this little island off the coast of Nova Scotia where he lived. He thinks, okay, I've heard rumors about buried treasure. So he gets his friends. They dig 30 feet down. They find this really interesting layer of stones, only 2 feet down. And then at 10-foot intervals, they find a platform of logs, seemingly implying there's something valuable buried down there, but that's as far as they can go. And then we had the whole saga of all the different attempts to find Oak Island, the treasure on Oak Island, which increasingly became this just morass of parallel shafts. The original money pit, so-called, is somewhere in there. And how these flood channel shafts that must have gone to a source in the ocean nearby, making it impossible to dig down far enough without the channel getting flooded to get this buried treasure, whatever it is. Most people think pirate treasure. So that's what we talked about. We set that up. Now we're going to talk about, so what is down there?
Wait, can I ask you a question before you start?
Of course.
Is there any kind of estimate on how much money has been spent?
Oh, that's a great question. I have
try to
millions, because right, they'd always be. I mean, they would generate $60,000 in investments and things like that back in the 1860s and 1890s was more than that even. So yes, for sure, millions in today's dollars easily. Of course, now by the folks who do the Curse of Oak Island TV show, it's a money-making proposition. It's a profitable business for them that's been going on for over a decade now. But yeah, over the years. And
are they really trying really hard?
I don't know.
Or
I don't watch the show. I was going to have seen snippets, but it doesn't seem like it.
I don't. I doubt if they
honestly, I think they fully know. I don't know. I think most of the people to date, and I think there is a core kernel of mystery here. I really do. At the bottom, so to speak, of the money pit. But I think most of the folks who have dug before these guys really have believed in their heart of hearts.
I do
that
too.
There's something there to find.
Because why would you go to all that trouble and spend all that money?
You know, when you can turn it into a reality show, I'm not convinced that wasn't the idea in the first place.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do here in part 2 is talk about what could be down there and get into some kind of theories of how it got down there. So first, just a quick recap in terms of what we have. We have this tunnel, 2 feet down, a layer of flagstones, and we'll put like an image. There's a really good sort of summation showing a vertical line and showing what was been found at the various depths of the digging over the years and where it stands at this point. You have these oak log platforms, 20 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet, etc. You had at 98 feet, you found this, or I'm sorry, either 80 feet or 90 feet, you had what we call the cipher stone, which is a stone that supposedly had an inscription on it. We'll talk a lot more about that in a bit. And at 98 feet, you had that incident where the people digging at the time found what seemed to them was a wooden top of a treasure chest, and that's when and this is early on, that's when it first flooded. So they came out the next morning. And thinking, okay, because it was nighttime, they stopped their digging. They say, okay, we're about, we're going to unearth another couple of feet and we're going to have this treasure. And then they came up and found that the shaft had been flooded all the way up to the 30-foot line. And then ever since then, these parallel shafts that have been attempted to dig to get at the money pit shaft, that direction, have always flooded as well. And we also had this story of this severed foot and some folks who were digging in relatively modern times because they can send a video camera down. Supposedly saw in real time, in live, they saw a foot and a hand and a dead body, very evocative of Pirates of the Caribbean scene. But then when they sent down a recorded camera down after that, they found nothing of the sort, which is, I'm just going to say it, this we were for sure lying. It could have been confirmation bias. I doubt it.
Yeah.
A body, really?
Yeah.
And it's a rock or something, or an old log in the water or something like that. But so the digging has gone all the way down to about 158 feet.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's gone very, very far down. there's been little things like little chains or a little piece of parchment have supposedly been pulled up as well. So
I call BS on the parchment.
And then supposedly there is this kind of layer of clay and then this void, this watery void down there, because again, Oak Island is made of limestone. It's very porous. It can have these kinds of things naturally. So that's kind of the lay of the land of where we stand at this point. In terms of the theories now, so let's just lay them out. The primary theories have to do with some kind of buried treasure.
Right.
So let's start with buried treasures, and it is plural. The number one theory is, of course, that it is buried treasure, and of course, who buries treasure?
Pirates.
Of course it's pirates. It's got to be. And that's the idea. There's this immense Oak Island treasure down there buried by the leading contender for this and kind of the only named pirate. Well, I guess there's been a couple others, but the primary one is Captain Kidd. Captain Kidd was a very famous pirate. He was in the right time, we think, because he was toward the latter part of the 17th century, the 1600s. He, of course, thought of himself as a legal privateer, and initially he was sort of commissioned by the English government to prey on French ships. It was privateers were simply legal pirates in the commission of one country versus another.
Right.
But he strayed into true piratism, and then he even started to prey on English boats. And so he was arrested, and he did sail off the kind of the northeastern coast of the U.S. / southeastern coast of Canada. So he was in the area at certain times. He did even hide I think a relatively small cache of treasure on Gardiner's Island, which lies off Long Island in New York. He hid that in 1698. So there's even this history of him hiding treasure. Okay. It's a little different though, because you might not be. It was a short-term play. He had this treasure. He's going to go into Boston and present himself to the authorities there. It was, of course, this is the Massachusetts colony under British rule at the time, of course. And so he put some treasure just to be sure he had access to some money. He didn't even bury it. He just put a couple of chests in a ravine on Gardiner's Island and told the landowner, I'm doing that. It's there. Take care of it. If I come back, it's not there. You and your family are dead.
Oh.
And so they, needless to say, took very good care of it until Captain Kidd came back to reclaim it. And so, but still, this is all very suggestive. And so Captain Kidd kind of very quickly became, Captain Kidd's treasure. He buried something, this time much more elaborately, on Oak Island, a place he wasn't all that far away from.
Yeah.
So, it did not make... That's the Captain Kidd pirate theory. There are other variations. Again, for the most part, we're going to discuss the plausibility of these theories later. Okay. So I'm just kind of laying out the possible ones. I will have some comments on some of them here, but more later on. So the variations on the buried treasure kind of an idea that don't always even involve pirates. One of these was developed from a fort built by the French, who controlled Nova Scotia at this time. It was called Louisbourg, and it's on the east coast of the peninsula that formed Cape Breton that forms Nova Scotia. Think like the farthest, almost about the farthest east you can go in Canada. And they built a fort called Louisbourg, and it was used to control the area that you'd go into, like if you're going to try to hunt for the Northwest Passage, that kind of area. Think of the North Atlantic, right?
Yeah.
That fort was completed in 1740, but it took about 20 years to build. And during that time, the French government had to send over what's called pay ships that were, used to pay the contractors, the workers, the soldiers, etc. over time. So this idea is that, hey, wait a second. What if one of those pay ships, for some reason, was involved with Oak Island treasure? So the French lost Louisbourg to the English when a militia raised in Massachusetts in 1745 attacked. Shortly after, the French had a guy named the Duc d'Anville go over there and retake Louisbourg. He had something like 65 or 75 ships. You're going to retake the fortress. Oh, and by the way, also when you're there, you should, quote, consign Boston to flames, ravage New England, and waste the British West Indies, unquote. So, no pressure on the Duc d'Anville with his fleet. Fortunately for Boston, and I guess also New England and the British West Indies, is that the fleet hit one of those frequent storms in the North Atlantic, very area of frequent and severe storms. A bunch of the ships were damaged. Some of them were lost. So the idea is that, hey, maybe one of those pay ships with lots of, silver coins and gold coins and things like that on it, maybe it was blown off course. It took shelter in Mahone Bay. It landed on Little Oak Island.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, because I don't know, it's that part is always kind of difficult.
Yeah.
But they decided, hey, let's bury this. And maybe they're going to have to trek by. Maybe the ship was ruined. I'm literally making this up right now on the spot. Maybe the ship was ruined, and we're going to have to trek by land back. And in those days, there's Native Americans. It was not a high probability they'd make it back. So let's bury the treasure here, and we'll know where it is when we come back. Right? That was the idea. So they did this incredibly intricate and elaborate. But now you have like French engineers, you have soldiers who are going to do what they're told and do all these man hours and all that labor.
I was going to say, it would have taken a long time.
It would have taken them a fair amount, even with that kind of manpower, it would take them a fair amount of time. But this is more attractive to some people because that's easier than saying that a pirate captain is going to have pirates do that kind of stuff. These are soldiers with skills and engineers with knowledge of how to do these kinds of things. There's naval engineers know how to build things because they have to, especially at this time.
Yeah.
So obviously this is pure speculation. There's no record. There's no evidence of any missing pay ship. There's no record of any lost captain burying treasure. So you think this would have, I don't know. There'd be some kind of record of this. All these missing livres that if the French fleet lost a pay ship, they would very likely have been a record of it at the time. So there's it's absolute speculation. But there's others. There's other ships. So one of those is the Concepcion. That's a ship that sunk in 1641. So again, these are ways that we can get buried treasure to Oak Island. These are some of the theories that have been propounded. And it sank at a fairly shallow reef in the Bahamas. And I remember when that happened, people knew it sank, and they even had an idea of roughly where it was because I think some of the folks survived.
Was it a Spanish?
It's a Spanish
ship?
galleon. Okay. It had lots of treasure on it.
Yeah.
So it sunk in 1641, but no one knew exactly where it was. Finally, in 1685, the English commissioned a guy named William Phipps, and he said, if you can go find the Concepcion, it's going to have a ton of booty on it, and bring it back to us, and we'll take the 45-year-old Spanish treasure for the English coffers. And he found it in 1685. He went out there and he found it, and in 1687 he salvaged 68,000 pounds of silver.
Wow!
So a huge amount, and he brought all that back to England. And in 1867, he got himself knighted. And they said, hey, there's more. Go out and get more. Or he said, by the way, I don't think I got it all.
Yeah.
So they sent him on another ship to go out and get more. This idea is this. What if William Phipps wasn't completely on the up and up? I'm sure he had a little reward or whatever. Mm-hmm. What if he took a bunch of it, or maybe on the second expedition found a lot more,
right? And
rather than give that to the English crown, decided to keep it for himself in cahoots with his crew. He would have to. So, and this idea is Phipps took his crew on at least one ship, and they went somewhere. It turns out Oak Island in Nova Scotia, I don't know, I'm going to say 3,000 miles or more away, was the place they went to, and they hit it. Same thing. He has there's a crew to have done the work. There's skilled folks there to have directed the work and figure out this way to make this, again, pretty elaborate deep shaft with flood channels that are horizontal to it to flood it at a certain level. It's triggered at a certain level to protect it from treasure robbers.
But also, why?
Yeah.
Why even do it?
I can't imagine. You're just going to become a pirate.
And why do it so long term?
Yeah.
Because how are you going to get it when you want to get it?
When we talk about problems, it's one of the main ones. Is the elaborateness of it, the difficulty in retrieving it just doesn't make a ton of sense. Why is my voice breaking?
I don't know.
I think it's puberty. So, but the idea is that maybe so he did do so. He people bring up, he did attack Port Royal in Quebec. I'm sorry, Port Royal and Quebec, two French cities up in that area. So maybe he was familiar with the area. Whatever. Yeah. Same thing. But that's kind of about it. It's pure speculation. It's like, again, here's a ship that would have had access to a ton of treasure, roughly the right time, familiar with the right area.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Unsupported speculation for sure. It has the same problems as pirates and pay ships. It's this elaborate effort, like you just said, wildly beyond seemingly the need to do so. Mm-hmm. So, and also, you're in the West Indies. There are lots and lots and lots of lonely coastlines before you ever get anywhere near Oak Island in Canada. There's no reason to go that far, you wouldn't think, unless there was something drawing them. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, there's plenty of holes in that one as well. But there are other sources of treasure besides even ships loaded to the waterline with gold and silver. When the French monarchy was overthrown in 1789, King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette eventually fled Paris with the crown jewels in June of 1791. They were captured soon after, and they didn't have the crown jewels. So, this is an idea. Oh, where are the crown jewels? Things like that. So one story says that Marie had one of her ladies in waiting gave the lady in waiting the crown jewels and said, keep these safe until the Bourbons are restored. And the Bourbons, I think so. And the idea is that maybe she fled to that French fortress in Louisbourg, remember, in Nova Scotia, not all that far from Oak Island.
Yeah.
And maybe, the authorities stashed them away in this elaborate thing in Oak Island, about 310 miles away from Louisbourg. I looked it up.
Okay.
By car today. So roughly, but still.
So I take this to mean nobody knows what happened to the crown jewels.
You would think that would mean that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Not true. So the problem with, before we get to that, the problem is that Louisbourg had gone back to France in 1748. So they were retaken in 1748, but in 1758, by treaty, it was given to the English. So Louisbourg wasn't even French anymore.
Yeah.
When this happened in 1791, supposedly. And just do a quick history search when you think of these theories. Hey, conspiracy theorizers, just do some homework.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking. Just go and you find out that why were the French lady in waiting? Go. Even then, the monarchy was donezo.
Yeah.
A French outpost wouldn't have been loyal to the monarchy in all likelihood. So, and of course, the pit was discovered in 1795, remember, according to the story. So that gives a pretty tight timeline for this to have happened and all this. It's not impossible, but it also means this would have gone on when that area was populated by the way, English colonists. And many of those English colonists, remember, were actually using Oak Island as a place to graze their cattle. So, again, that work would have taken minimum weeks.
Yeah.
It just seems incredibly unlikely. But, that it's still kind of a little bit possible, maybe if you squint, but it is evidence free and it's pure speculation, like frankly all of these are. Here's the problem though: the French jewels are more or less accounted for.
Okay.
So Marie Antoinette smuggled some of them out and some of her own jewels with like a friend of hers to Vienna. She was Austrian, and the rest were seized by the revolutionary government after the royal pair fled. Okay. There's only sort of most of it was still there after they fled. So it's actually a historical fiction that they fled with a bunch of the crown jewels. That's not true. Again, they found out later that she had already sent a chunk of them away with that friend to Vienna. And then the rest that remained in Paris were stolen later that year the next year in 1792. And so there's no reason to tie them to Marie Antoinette in any way, shape, or form. They're some, revolutionary person who had access to the palace, almost certainly stole them in 1792 and sold them off. Some have been found since, most have not. They're just in collections all over Europe in all likelihood. So they're more or less accounted for. So the whole thing rides on something that just, the city you have, the fort you have her go to is no longer French, and the things you have her go there with are accounted for.
Right.
So this is a sloppy one.
Yeah.
It's a sloppy theory. It doesn't make any sense. But what if there was treasure, but it wasn't European treasure? What if it was Western Hemispheric treasure? At least we're getting closer to Canada. Maybe some people have said Incan treasure or Mayan treasure, to which I say, that's a thing? I hadn't been aware of that.
I know, I'm
not sure. Or Aztec treasure. Those people, they collected gold and things like that, remember? So all those theories have their champions as Oak Island hides Incan treasure or Aztec treasure or Mayan treasure. Oak Island to hide their treasure? Okay. I mean, I guess just ahead of the conquering Spaniards. I don't know.
I mean, I would say no.
Well, here's the theory. The leading theory in this ilk is that in 1533, Francisco Pizarro, he's the guy who conquered the Incan Empire. When he conquered or captured the king Atahualpa, he demanded that, like, they had a room, and he said, fill this room with gold, and I'll let your king live. So Atahualpa had his general, Ruminyahui, lead the effort to go, throughout the Incan Empire, collect gold, whatever, trinkets. I mean, it wasn't, it's fiction that they didn't, they did work with gold and they made gold things. So it's collect all the gold they can. They had to fill this room with gold to save their king. So he did that. The problem is sometime along the way before Ruminyahui was done. I'm doing it phonetically.
Yeah,
God knows.
I'm sure you're
the
wrong,
pronunciation
but
is.
that's okay.
So he, Pizarro got pissy with Atahualpa and had him garroted before the Incan general came back with all the gold. What gold he had collected by that time. It's a pretty conquistador thing to do because they were douchebags. And so the Incan general, whose name I'm not going to try to say anymore, he said, okay, well, screw you. And he didn't deliver the gold that he had collected. So that's where the rumor, that's how it gets tied to Oak Island. Okay, so he's got all this gold. It's worth a lot. Contemporaneous rumors said he hid it somewhere in the forest, the mountains to the east of Cusco, the main Incan, capital.
Yeah.
Or maybe he just said, screw them, and he sunk it in the bottom of a lake.
Yeah.
Something like that. That was sort of the dominant rumor. There was this idea that there was this sort of lost treasure.
Yeah. But why would they go to the trouble to take it thousands of miles away? They wouldn't.
Carrie, or work with me here. He sent a long-range sea-going vessels that I'm pretty sure the Incans did not have to Oak Island in then non-existent Canada to bury it in the territory of the Micmacs. I'm sure good friends with the Incans.
Yeah.
With whom they were, I want to say 9,000 miles distance.
Yeah.
So you're probably wondering how far it is from the coast of Peru to Nova Scotia. Well, I looked it up. Turns out it is about, who the hell cares? This is an incredibly stupid miles from Cusco. So that's a long way.
Yeah.
Who the hell cares? This is incredibly stupid. Is a lot of miles.
Yeah.
So you could say maybe the Spaniards themselves stole that Incan treasure and they buried it on Oak Island. Again, this is, I don't know, probably hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from even the nearest Spanish outpost at the time. So the one thing that this has been cited, though, that these kinds of theories that stem from kind of hotter latitudes is that, what about the coconut fibers? Remember the coconut fibers that were found? It's like, well, coconuts in that area, they have coconuts down there. So maybe pretty thin if you're tying the whole thing to coconut fibers that were indeed found on Oak Island. But, that's the story. They're sticking to it. There are plenty more theories that find some way to get something of value to Oak Island. I'll just do a couple quickies here. St. Andrew's Cathedral in Scotland. It was a center of Catholic resistance to the Protestant takeover of Great Britain. This is like the 1500s. Yeah. And Protestants at one point sacked the church and they took all like the relics and artifacts. So people have said since, like, oh, wait, what if they got, like the clerics knew that was going to happen. Like, hey, they're going to come for us anytime now. They collected all the really cool stuff, the really valuable stuff in this famous church, and like gold and silver, and I'm going to say bejeweled goblets or whatever. And they fled to the New World to protect these treasures. Work with me here. What if they told no one, and there's no official record of this, of any of this happening? What if that would have been, which of course would have been pretty amazing in the middle of the 1500s, decades before the Scots were really doing anything like going over to the New World. They didn't really start doing that until the very end of the 1500s. So, but wait, Carrie, what does Nova Scotia mean? Carrie, in Latin.
New
Scotland.
Oh, Scotland.
Okay. Don't be a dick about this. Just accept it like Morocco would. Okay? That's all we need to know. New Scotland, Nova Scotia. It must be Scottish. I can only assume that's where the St. Andrew's Cathedral stems from, is because let's find something in Scotland. Nova Scotia means New Scotland. So those are the various buried treasure theories. There are some other things that aren't like, gold and silver. And those are, I guess I'd put them under the rubric of like religious artifacts or historical artifacts. And these are taken very seriously. A couple of these are the kind of the leading theories now from the Curse of Oak Island people. Yeah. So, Carrie, I can tell you're upset about the buried treasures. You're not buying it. So let's move away from those buried treasures to other kinds of treasures. There are some religious and historical artifacts seen as treasures, not the same gold and silver and bejewels, but still a treasure to many people, worth a lot, depending on what they are.
Yeah.
So not a treasure in the pure sense, but a treasure in for historical reasons or something like that.
We're talking Bible stuff?
Yes, this is going to have some Bible stuff for sure. The leading one definitely has that. And this leading one, I'll get to here in just a minute, is actually kind of one of the main conspiracy theories that our friends at the Curse of Oak Island on almost every show talk about without actually digging for that treasure they're supposedly digging for. So some, I'm going to say air quote researchers, and just about everyone who has written about Oak Island can only be called a researcher if you're being extraordinarily charitable. But one of those has claimed to have detected some Masonic symbols on Oak Island. So we're going to bring the Freemasons into it because as you do. Yes. How the Illuminati have not been dragged in this, I don't know. Yeah. I just gave someone the idea for that. Right now, listening, they will write a book.
Dan Brown.
It'll be a YouTube film in no time. So, and, the money pit itself does, to some people, kind of resemble a Masonic ritual in which there's like a hidden vault and secret treasure. Okay?
Yeah.
You agree?
Yeah.
Just say yes.
Yeah, I said yeah.
Again, let's be more like Morocco, Carrie, and just accept these things, please.
I did.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Another of that kind of researcher believes that the Freemasons were the inheritors of the vast riches of the Knights Templar. Some of these things are included things like the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah. I don't think anyone would deny those would be major treasures.
Even the Shroud.
Maybe the Shroud. I haven't seen the Shroud, but let's throw that in there.
And also Masons would know how to do this. They would know how to engineer this.
Gary, hell yes, they would.
I know.
They're Masons, for God's sake. They're free.
Exactly.
They're free, but they're still Masons. So that's, that's a good point.
A lot of engineering and construction know-how.
So apparently the Templars kept it safe for the 340 years after they were completely destroyed before they decided, you know what, they'd be better off buried in an elaborate booby-trapped shaft in a tiny island off the coast of faraway Nova Scotia because that's what you do.
Yeah.
So they made that decision. And again, this is the tangent that is the folks at the Curse of Oak Island continue to come back to time and time again, which tells you a lot about the seriousness of the people making Oak Island and the channel that airs it. We'll get back to that later. Another one of these along these lines, though, involves William Shakespeare. You think, like, what? A place so filthy they had to bury it at the 100 feet down a shaft in Nova Scotia? Huh.
And what was their capability of water tightness in these days? Everything would be ruined.
Carrie,
no,
you're not being like Morocco now, are you? So some people refuse to believe that William Shakespeare wrote the plays that were written by William Shakespeare.
Right.
It says by William Shakespeare right there. So that's been true for long. That's a whole different, maybe we'll do that one day.
Yeah.
Some of those people are also into the mystery of Oak Island. So it's like we got a mashup here. We got peanut butter and chocolate.
Well, there's Venn diagrams for everything.
Damn right. There's this one. Oak Island, William Shakespeare didn't write his plays. That has a Venn diagram. There is a place where those two intersect. And they think that this treasure, quote unquote, hidden at the bottom of the money pit is actually some kind of cache of documents that prove, most people say that Francis Bacon wrote the plays attributed to William Shakespeare. Some people say Christopher Marlowe, he was a playwright. Francis Bacon was he was like a scholar, a politician, a philosopher. He was contemporaneous with Shakespeare for the most part. But why it's been Bacon associated with the Oak Island thing, we'll get to in a second, and it kind of dovetails with what we just mentioned. So the idea is Bacon, and they have these documents that prove that for some reason. The reason they pick out Bacon is because he was supposedly head of the Rosicrucians at the time, even though that group, if it actually really existed as a functional group, wasn't formed until right toward the end of Shakespeare's life. But, okay, that's fine. And by the way, they also formed in Germany, but that's fine. But, scholars traveled.
Why would they feel the need to bury them way far away?
You're getting ahead of it, Karen.
Okay.
The theory involves codes and ciphers and conspiracies, but, what it does not involve is, I guess, facts or reason or rational thought. This is one of those conspiracy theories that it's really weak at the knees in the sense that it's just there's no motivation. It's weakly motivated. Why do you hide?
Yeah.
Anything that says this guy wrote William Shakespeare's plays back at the time where this was a thing.
If you need it not to come to light, you burn it.
You literally read my note from later on in the show, by the way. So yeah, but you do. So
yeah, this is the dumbest one of all.
The whole thing of William Shakespeare didn't write. Why? Christopher Marlowe is said because they had to fake his death for some reason, because he's going to be, arrested for treason or something like that. So they had to fake his death, and then he needed something to do and make a living. So, as a little bit, Francis Bacon, why? Was it beneath you, Francis, because you were a scholar? You don't write these plays meant for mass consumption? I don't know. It's kind of like, in this case, it's kind of like the government hiding UFOs kind of a thing. There's just no driving reason for them to do that. So it kind of, in my mind, the whole idea of the government's hiding UFOs, it doesn't matter how much alleged evidence you bring up. There's just no motivation to do that. People will freak out. So it's just so dumb. There's no real reason to do that. And it's the same thing with the Shakespeare Bacon theories in my mind. So it's just,
silly. That one's silly.
Let's just say that the Shakespeare fake place thing is as weak as a government bank regulator. Oh, I made a stand. Okay, there we go.
Good one.
I just had to force that in. Obviously, it didn't make sense. Barry Fell was someone that people I've seen the word pseudo archaeologist to use to describe him. Sometimes you can also call him a fraud archaeologist, is what I think is. I made that up, and I think it's far more apt. I've heard it both ways. He was a legitimate marine biologist. One of those things, some of these people come like Dr. Oz was a very good surgeon, and then became a grifter. Barry Fell.
Do you know for a fact he was a very good surgeon?
He was essentially with Columbia University. You would think he'd have to be a pretty good surgeon, just by the affiliation, the association. I'll give New York University or Columbia, right?
I don't know.
I think one of those. But this guy Barry Fell was a published and a professional, legitimate marine biologist. But then he apparently got bored with actual science and began exploring the supposed ancient origins of the discovery of America thing. It's a whole kind of a subgenre. And this is like, oh no, it was whatever. Everyone wanted to be. It was, we now know the Vikings, of course, did land here, but it's like, oh, the people from China or Africa or whatever. Mostly, it's usually, very often it is Europeans, and some of them racist because they have like Vikings or Norse or Europeans coming over here much early and building things that they can't imagine Native Americans could have built for themselves. So he's one of those guys, and what he specialized in was ancient writings. Basically, if you found an old rock and it had some scratches on it, he was going to tell you that's a rune, and here's what it says.
Yeah,
he was that guy. So naturally, he hears about the cipher stone with that coded writing, that inscription on it. He's got to take a look at that. He supposedly looked at a version of the inscription, and we'll get to later when we talk about the cipher stone, how likely that was. And like all amateur experts, he quickly unraveled the mystery that no one else could do, because that's how this works. Professionals, people steeped in that with specific expertise, they're clueless.
Yeah.
This dude who has never thought about that, has zero experience and zero expertise in that, he figured it out pronto. Yeah. And here's what it means. And I'll write a book about it. And so he said, okay, you know what that is? Guess what that writing is? It's Coptic. Coptic is a pretty much dead language of ancient Egypt. So somehow you now have to get ancient Egyptians to bury this thing. Remember that was 80 or 90 feet down was that cipher stone was found.
Yeah.
And write a message in Coptic and bury it 80 or 90 feet down this booby-trapped shaft in Canada. Okay, so tough. But he's Barry Fell. He knows what he's doing. And he said that he read the cipher as saying, quote, "To escape contagion of plague and winter hardships, he is to pray for an end or mitigation, the Arif, A-R-I-F. Semicolon. The people will perish in misery if they forget the Lord. Alas." End quote. A lot to unpack there, and I'm not going to unpack it.
Yeah.
I will say that he based this deciphered text on his years and years of having absolutely no experience whatsoever, expertise in this field and the logic, his logic that he used was, why not? I can invent literally anything I wanted to say and just say it said it, which is what he used those two methods here to decipher the stone, which I think was brilliant. And so per Barry Fell, the Coptic peoples from Egypt sailed to Oak Island, buried the stone 100 or so, or almost 100 feet down, with this intricate, series of shafts, etc., flood channels to save a stone that does what? That means what? Well,
maybe the people that buried it just happened to have that stone. Not necessarily it was those people. You know what I mean?
Oh, I see what you mean. You should be Barry Fell. You should write a book actually.
Sure.
Because why not? Because again, as you've just demonstrated, just make something up.
Yeah.
And there's no proof of that. There's no indication of that. There's no reason to think that. Why? What is this thing doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
I don't know what it means to the people at the time. It doesn't mean anything, let alone to anybody in the future, which is what you're usually doing when you do something in stone. When you inscribe something in stone, you intend for it to last.
Yeah.
I don't know who the hell Arif is. I didn't even bother to look it the fuck up because I don't care. It's so dumb. So I don't know. That's my take on buried fell. But that's the last of the kind of, I don't know, esoteric or treasure-like kind of things that are said to have been buried. I'm sure there's more.
Yeah.
I don't know. So you next get to some of the more mundane reasons of what could be down there of value or why this shaft was built on Oak Island. And there are a few of these. One of those is that Oak Island was an old pyrite mine. Do you know what pyrite is?
I mean, I've heard of it, but
there's a nickname for it, a kind of an alternate name for it.
Is it fool's gold?
It's fool's gold, yeah. And it's called that because it resembles gold, but it's not gold. So pretty basic. The idea is that when Queen Elizabeth I sent a guy named Martin Frobisher, he was a famous English explorer, and she sent him to look for the Northwest Passage in 1567. When she sent him off to do this with his little fleet, she also asked him that, hey, while you're doing this, along the way, you need to find some gold to pay for the expedition. So they apparently made their explorers multitask a lot back then.
I mean, that would be quite a time-consuming detour.
By the way, Martin, come here. Find some gold. That shouldn't be too much. You're going to Canada. Plenty of gold there. So Frobisher did indeed bring back a couple hundred tons of what it was gold ore on his first one. They sent him back for another one. He went and got 1,350 tons on the next trip. And somewhere in Canada, somewhere over that, it's not clear that it was Nova Scotia in that, but he was able to get all this back and he brought it back to England. Sadly, and I think they told him this when he got back from the second expedition, he said, oh, hey, dude, this is not gold. It's pyrite, dum-dum. It's virtually worthless. So he just brought back over 1,500 tons of worthless pyrite ore.
Wow.
Thanks so much, Martin. Here's the executioner. Go with him. So he wasn't really executed. Yeah. So you say, okay, what does that have to do with Oak Island again? The pyrite has been tied to Oak Island by actually not anything whatsoever. Even the semi-official Oak Island website, I'll quote that a few more times. I've quoted that in these theories. I've quoted that already. It kind of it's a website that's basically called the Mystery of Oak Island, and it's I don't know if it's official, but it says here's the story. It's clearly a proponent of the Oak Island mystery. Even that website says that this theory is, quote, a bit of a leap. And that, quote, the connection of these pyrite mining expeditions in a different part of Canada to Oak Island seems tenuous at best, end quote.
But so what is the theory? That they buried pyrite down there?
Exactly. Okay. Thinking it's gold or whatever.
But why would they? They were taking thousands of tons. Okay.
Like I say, even that
doesn't
website,
have to make sense.
Tenuous at best. And no theory associated with the Mystery of Oak Island needs to make sense. That's the simple fact. So some people say, well, but there could have been some kind of industrial works other than pyrite mining, right? One author thought that the money pit might be a tar kiln. Oak Island had, I guess for a time, it was kind of a center of tar making for the British Navy at some point. Supposedly, allegedly, maybe. At least that's what this some source said. I can't remember which. Others thought that maybe it was like an old salt works or something like that. The obvious problem here is why you're building for it to make tar or salt. You don't dig these shafts. You don't booby trap them with flood channels. It just makes no sense. It's just sort of, you get desperate at sometimes. And, and I don't know if that's people trying to think, well, wait a second. The buried treasure stuff is kind of weird and kind of, it's very speculative. Maybe it's just something natural.
Right.
And that's the things. There is a more mundane. The mundanest theory is the most obvious theory, and that is that the shaft was a natural sinkhole. Yeah. The limestone, as we talked about, is a porous rock that makes it comparatively easy to dig, as Dan McGinnis found out right away. And he thought it was because it was refill. Maybe it's because it was just it was a porous rock. Right. But it also makes it susceptible to things like eroded shafts and tunnels and sinkholes and caves and things like that happen in that kind of a rock. those kinds of things are found in Oak Island, and they're found in that nearby mainland of Nova Scotia as well.
Yeah.
So the argument here is that the Money Pit, as well as, remember there's that other shaft found in 1949 near Smith's Cove that was very uncannily alike. It had the platform logs and things like that.
Yep.
Like both those were natural sinkholes. And what happens is that over time, just the detritus, soil, sticks, wooden logs and things like that, maybe after a heavy wind or something like that, were blown into these sinkholes and gradually over time filled up. So it's that, again, it's loose because it's natural refill as opposed to, I guess, man-made refilling a hole that a person or people just dug.
And
That's
so
the
them
idea.
describing it like a plank or platform of log, the way I picture it is these logs very nice and neatly, set up right next to each other to,
That's how I picture it as well. I'm going to come back to that at the very end of this and talk a little bit about that, because I think that is a bit of a hole in these holes.
Right.
But the idea is, those are natural wood that looked to them like some kind of a platform.
Are there any pictures of any of the more modern
what?
Excavations?
The wooden platforms are long gone. They've been gone since probably the 1860s. There.
Oh, okay.
Once you dug down to the 100-foot level, they're all gone.
Okay.
They dug through those wooden platforms, so they've been gone forever.
Okay.
And the idea is that you can also have these horizontal shafts, eroded shafts in under Oak Island, and that's how you get these what have been interpreted as man-made flood channels.
Yeah.
They're natural, essentially. They're more natural shafts.
Yeah.
There are two counter arguments to this theory, and you just hit on one. One is minor, one is massive. The first one is to this natural sinkhole idea is the block and tackle. The block and tackle does indicate, over the Depression, does indicate that there was something there, and that the original discoverers, saw a block and tackle. Dan McGinnis and friends. That we'll get back.
Okay.
We'll get to that later. And the other one is that we'll also get to later is that the natural sinkhole wouldn't have perfect 10-foot intervals. Right. Also, they wouldn't be described as platforms. You wouldn't think they wouldn't be at perfect 10-foot intervals. There's also, remember, that 2 feet under, there was that layer of stones clearly laid down by a person, and you then have the regular interval. So we'll get to that later, but that is that's a definite counter argument to the natural sinkhole theory.
Well, I have a theory about the block and tackle. Do you want it now or do you want it later?
Let's do it later.
Okay.
So,
and I could also explain the layers and the.
Ooh. I can't wait to hear that.
Okay.
Let's do that. Let's do that later. First, I'm going to talk about. We'll start with kind of the holes in the hole and in these theories. So we're first going to talk about. Remember, I told you I was going to mostly leave alone the holes in the treasure theories. I did a little bit of that already. So, but I want to talk about the pirate stuff and Captain Kidd specifically a little more now.
Okay.
So, a core problem with the finding some pirate who could have and would have done this is that this is just not pirating activity, and the leading one, Captain Kidd specifically, is very problematic because he did come up to the area around that Oak Island in like 1698, 1699, and he arrived in Boston in 1699, which is not all that far from Oak Island. And that main Oak Island website I said, it said, quote, that Kidd had ample time to conceal his treasure in the money pit, end quote. No, he didn't.
Yeah.
Not really. Kidd arrived in Boston on July 2nd or 3rd of 1699, and he was arrested on July 6th of 1699. He had been lured there by the Massachusetts governor, who was kind of a friend of his in the old days, and under the pretense of, hey, I think I can get you a pardon. Mm-hmm. He didn't. He lured him there for a reward. And so he's betrayed, sent back to England, and he was hanged in 1701. So even that official website admits that Oak Island's works would have taken almost certainly months to have built.
Yeah.
So Kidd had 3 or 4 days.
No way. Unless he had a crew there doing it.
Oh God, you're not going to, hey crew,
I know.
Take all my money and build. No, you would never see that again. And you'd no pirate. That's a core thing, is that you're asking for this to be done by pirates.
Yeah.
That's just ludicrous if you know anything about pirates.
What about the pirate honor code dean?
Yeah, no. They were the thugs of the sea. They were murderers and cutthroats and drunks and lowlifes and scum. They knew they were probably going to die as a pirate.
Yeah.
They didn't care.
Yeah.
They were, from the worst of society. It really is, honestly. It was like either live in grinding poverty doing horrific work back in England, or be a pirate, have a blast, party, get drunk for a few years, and die somewhere along the way, in likelihood, and you knew it. So, it's the other thing with kids specifically is though that there's no question the reason he remember he hid some treasure the year before on Gardeners Island. He was going to use that to bribe some people.
Yeah.
If he had this huge treasure buried on Oak Island, he without question
use it. Yeah.
bribes his way out of it. He wound up back in England in chains and hanged. That never would have happened if he had access to a treasure that could have bought his way out of it. Yeah. Very corrupt. There's no question you could have bribed somebody. You could have bribed, with that kind of money. You could bribe that governor of Massachusetts easily.
Yeah.
It's like, sorry, the guards fell asleep.
Yeah.
Can't blame me. I'm rich. See ya. So there are other pirates, though, like Henry Morgan, Bartholomew Sharp, Jean Lavessiere. You probably didn't know I knew so much about pirates, did you? So I didn't either. I've heard of Henry Morgan. The other ones, not so much. So they were active in the far West Indies.
What about Bonnie? Wasn't there somebody with the last name Bonnie?
Bonnie, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Henry, but they're named Henry.
Yeah.
For the most part. So there's other pirates that Oak Island enthusiasts have brought into this kind of a thing for sure, without question. One of the leading theories about pirates, though, I didn't touch it, I'll touch it now, is this communal bank, like a communal pirate bank in Oak Island. So how do you get a bunch of people to build something? Well, what if pirates put their resources together and build a bank they could all use whenever they needed to hide booty in there? That's literally a significant theory in the pirate treasure kind of thing right now.
It was very user not friendly.
It's extremely user not friendly. You'd have to posit that they had some way of easily turning off the water source. That's why I remember so many of the searches were in the Smith's Cove and whatnot. They, to this day, no one's found anything that remotely does that with all the modern resources we have now. So maybe, but still, let's take it seriously. It could explain the intricacies of the pit. It can explain the massive effort to build it. They combine the resources. Maybe they even, I'm going to stop myself right there because this is a truly stupid and dumb idea. Pirates would not have done this. You'd never work together.
Yeah.
You wouldn't trust anyone. The day after all the pirates left, after building and putting their booty in this, it would have been stolen by one of their number with it. No question whatsoever. This is just not, the pirates, the generic argument is that pirates aren't savers. They aren't planners. They aren't hoarders. They were spenders. Henry Morgan, he did. He plundered, I think it was Panama. He made a vast amount of money pirating. He then used that to buy his way into polite society in Jamaica and live rich for the rest of his life. He was the one who got out. Yeah. And I think he had a plantation or something like that and lived high on the hog for the rest of his life. Wow. He spent
making rum?
His money. Now I think he probably had a sugar plantation based on slaves. Yeah. Again, not a good person. No. None of them were. So pirates were thugs and killers. They were, as a rule, not educated. They didn't have engineers. Yeah. And they didn't have planners. No one would have even known how to have done this, let alone be motivated to do it. It's just, you have to stop thinking pirates. Yeah. There's zero chance pirates would have done anything like that. Just completely out of character for them, also beyond them in terms of manpower, time, technology,
they dug a hole at the base of a tree in the sand and then put a big black X over it.
No, I'm serious.
I'm joking.
100%. They would have just, you didn't do that. You do what he did at Gardener's Cove. You put it in a kind of secret place. But more like if you are digging, there probably was at some point in the history, there probably was a pirate that dug a 3-foot hole at the first point past the tree line on the beach, used a big, put a big X on a tree next to it, and then came back 6 months later or something like that and got it. But this is just so not piratey. It doesn't make any sense at all. So
I agree.
I know. Remember the pay ship, the French pay ships that supposedly landed at Louisburg or were going to Louisburg and got blown off course? It's the same. Maybe, the argument again was that they were more able to have done that. Maybe they did have the manpower and the technology to do so. Same thing. Why? You need that pay ship was intended to pay the people building the fort. Why would you bury it? Yeah. I surmised, or just made up this idea that maybe they had crashed their ship, and there's no, you think that would have, then that ship would have, if they can, had the wherewithal, most of them lived in order to do this kind of work, there'd be evidence of that shipwreck in Mahone Bay, and there's not.
Yeah.
So I did make that up, and I just refuted it. I just So I'm doing the argument and the counter argument now. So there's no reason the Louisburg pay ship, which is again is a pretty trendy idea. It's one of the top ones you read about. It's just as dumb as the pirate one. There's no reason to do it with that. Even if my thing was true, like you said, they're going to be back in a few months, or they're never going to be back at all. Why? Because they're either going to die, or they're going to be back in a few weeks.
Yeah,
it makes no sense. You dig a 4-foot hole. So so I mean, really, it was Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. It published in 1883 that made buried treasure popular, but there were references before that. I do have a soft spot for the Francis Bacon manuscripts idea because it's different than gold and jewels, which are usually thought of. So that's kind of good. But good Lord, that theory is ridiculous and absurd, as we talked about. Sense. No. So forget the Bacon thing. Oh, one of the things they cite, though, because there's some that's very specific. They say, well, wait a second, you skeptic. Bacon experimented with mercury. All right. You answered that as, So, well, I don't know because he was working on document preservation. Did you know, asshole, that there were flasks found on Oak Island and they had traces of mercury in them? Did you know that? Response is, you're saying so it's probably not true. But if it is true, again, I mean, almost like that's a logical connection. Yeah. They also say, and they kind of like matter of factly, that website I mentioned, without an iota of proof, that website says something like that. Bacon was a Knights Templar, so now they tie him to the blah 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 blah. What? Yeah. No, he wasn't. There was no such thing as Knight Templars when he was alive. Yeah. That doesn't make sense. And again, and even if that's true, so therefore money pit. You've skipped over 17 things to get to that. It's weird how, a third one is that one of it, like an employee of his or something like that, or something like that, or a servant would later go on to work on flooding mines. That is, retrieving or fixing flooded mines in Cornwall where they had a lot of tin mines. Right. Yeah. So, okay. Oh, and he also knew someone who knew about flooded mines. Case closed. Knights Templar. Mercury, dude who worked with flooded mines. We're done here. It's Bacon. That's kind of the German, that's the basics of their argument. It's so stupid. Again, even that Oak Island official website concludes, quote, there are many interesting connections or coincidences presented by this theory. Are there? No. These connections are those colored strings that trace across from wall to wall in somebody's basement. Yeah. That's what these connections are. They're less than worthless. And it's even more so for the Knights Templar theory, which I'll get into more now. Proponents of the Knights Templar theory have argued that Knights Templars, they could have held on to their secret for centuries, even after they were destroyed. They were destroyed in the 1200s by the French king, and because he owed him a lot of money. And they took all their wealth, they tortured a bunch of them, and they executed a bunch of them, and they disbanded. The Knights Templars no longer even existed past the 1200s for the most part. The proponents of the Knights Templar idea, because that's just too soon to have a money pit, right? So what they say is that, well, hold on, smarty pants. Did you know that King Portugal at the time, by the way, his name was Dennis I, phenomenal, or Denis, I don't know, but he actually let the Templars go on. This is actually a true story. I looked this up, and he thumbed his nose at the Pope, which is pretty surprising because the King of France got the church to go along with him to knock out the Knights Templar. And he said, nope, I'm going to let them continue. I'll just make them change their name. So the Knights Templars changed their name to the Military Order of Christ, and otherwise went on more or less with what they've been doing in Portugal, and only in Portugal. Okay. So these theorizers then say, oh, and also, douchebag, did you know that a Portuguese explorer did go to Nova Scotia, are pretty damn close, and that there were some Portuguese like fishing outposts maybe in and around Nova Scotia back then. So it's like, oh, that's interesting. Go on. And there are kind of this it brings in this idea. Remember I mentioned the Masonic, like people say, oh, this stone, that's a Masonic symbol on this stone found on Oak Island. Is it though? Is it? And or even like this is a knight. These are Knights Templar codes and things like that. It's just it goes on and on ad nauseum. All of it built on these like would have been true, and it could have been, and what if, that kind of, I'm not going to use the word logic because it's sort of anti-logic. The task for these folks, honestly, it just seems that if they can simply imagine some kind of connection or connections between the Knights Templars and Oak Island, that's it. They've made their case.
Yeah.
You know, you must believe that the Templars made that money pit if they had something valuable to bury there, and we think they got the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail. Mm-hmm. So, and they just wish away all the problems with that kind of nonsense. Yeah, you could enumerate it. The Templars would have to have had a treasure to be hidden. They'd have to pick Oak Island as the place to hide it.
Yeah.
Crazy. They would have had to have the means to have got to Oak Island. This would have been sometime in the 1400s or 1500s, something like that, no later. They would have had to have been able to get to Oak Island at about the right time. They would have had the ability to dig this elaborate money pit, to have successfully hidden this treasure without a hint of its existence for centuries. Remember, somehow you have to, the Portuguese Knight Templars get the two most important artifacts in which, by the way, were never in the possession of the actual Knight Templars. Yeah. That also is a nonsense conspiracy theory.
But also, for sure, you're not going to want to submerge them in water.
Well, that's true. And then you're going to put them in a place where you can almost certainly never retrieve it, far, far away from you. For what? Why are you saving them if you're just going to essentially destroy them or put them or bury them forever? It doesn't make any sense. And it's, again, they just skip over all those connections and pretend as if we can connect a Knights Templar to Oak Island somehow. We're done. We've proven our point. Yeah. It's you know, you haven't proven the antecedent to it, and you haven't proven any of the connections to go from point A to point B that you're saying. It's
plenty of other places to dig a dry hole.
Yes. Yeah.
It does
that were closer, more accessible, and you can argue, they wanted to make sure it was someplace far away from, whatever the church or something like that.
Yeah. I mean,
Oak Island. It's just Oak Island.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Yeah.
So there's no even imagined connection to the Templars until recently. This is actually a pretty recent thing, and that's kind of telling.
Yeah.
Those string connecting these two dots, they leave out a ton of other strings that should be there, but the fact that it's happened pretty recently is pretty. Knights Templars has become a thing.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It became a thing, and people wanted to connect it to all sorts of conspiracies and. Yeah.
It gets, I don't know, Knights Templar, you put Knights Templar and it gets clicks, it gets views on YouTube, it sells books, it hooks viewers. So the Knights Templar thing is just pure opportunism. It's not to be taken seriously by anyone who's honestly exploring the mystery of Oak Island, which I am and we are. And again, it's become a number one part of the TV show, The Curse of Oak Island, is them discussing the Knights Templar thing because, because they're opportunists and they know what sells.
Right.
So that is the end of part one. I'm sorry.
Part two.
That is it of part two. We are going to get to part three, and we're going to discuss some of, for lack of a better term, holes in the holes itself, some things that sort of counter-argue the counter-arguments a little bit. And we're going to talk about those platforms and things like that.
Okay.
And then we're going to...
and I'll tell you my theories about the platforms and
I would like to hear that.
Hook and tackle. What's it called? Bait and tackle?
Block and tackle. I like bait and tackle. That's fine. I raw hook and tackle and bait and tackle. You have a lot of phrases that involve the word tackle. I like that. Football tackle. So one of the things I want to talk about next time is that cipher stone, because that's critical.
Yeah.
The cipher stone was the only thing that said this is treasure.
Yeah.
That unequivocally says this is treasure. So we're going to go through. It's got a really fascinating past, a provenance of the cipher stone. So we'll go into the cipher stone and what that means, and then we'll end it up with we'll come back to what the biggest hole is in the whole mystery of Oak Island story to begin with, and we'll end there. So until next time,
sounds great.
See ya.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.